just for the sake of moving through some things, it's pretty lengthy. We're going to skip over in-person, of course. Normally going forward, we would kind of do it last year. Break up a little bit, introduce directors, officials, that sort of thing. If you're curious as to what people are up to, we'll have any of the boxes, everybody's kind of be we're going to move into our voting items. The first one being the approval of the minutes from August 9th, 2023. So, are there any points of discussion? Alrighty, any other points of discussion? No. Good. Yeah, I don't like to any other points of discussion? Alrighty, any questions? Alrighty, any questions? Alright, so the motion passes by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? It was the first one. It was on that. Who did that? I really did do that, guys. Alright, so on the motion, yes. You're telling me. Anything else? Okay. On the motion passes by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Alright. Perfect. This passes. Then we're going to move on to a couple of Senate confirmations, which is we're excited. So we can have everyone who is going to say their names for us from us. You guys are going to be confirmed, and then you're going to do your oath. So we have Carl to the position of MCD Senator. We have Gavin to the position of School Business Senator. Linda. Winston will participate in here, she's going to be the African American Cultural Center at Tokyo, and then Brian for the Puerto Rican Latin American Cultural Center. You guys want to come up? Or you can go over to where Leo is. He's going to lead you guys through the oath. Are there any points of discussion? Any questions on these confirmations? Alrighty, so I'm going to motion to pass all four of these by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? You guys are confirmed. Oh, I can pull up the I know, I like you do this. I don't know where anything is. discussion? Any questions? Alrighty, so I'm going to motion to pass each of these by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Alrighty, so those all pass, so congrats to everybody on their committee. Also, for anybody new, unanimous consent is like, passing by unanimous consent is just, there's not a lot of discussion or questions. Normally we do it for confirmations. Just means that everybody agrees on it. And if you do object to it, you think that we should do a hand vote or a voice vote or however that may look, you just say, I object, and then we'll move into like an actual vote, and we'll kind of figure it out that way. But moving on to this, motion to disburse the entire PERG hunger and homelessness account of $439.07 to the Windows No Freeze Shelter, which is 10.
Sorry. Hey y'all. Thanks Allie for guiding us through that wonderful public comment. Super awesome. Great job. What? You shouldn't. It was genuine. So there's some history behind this one, which is last June, so not this past June, but the June before, one trustee organization, just like USG, known as UConn Praxis, was disbanded, and all of its funds were transferred to USG. Now, the majority of those funds are being used for our advocacy and to support students in a lot of different ways. However, Praxis, and before that, their former organization, PERG, had this separate account that they used to collect donations and disperse to the Wyndham No Freeze Shelter. There was an issue with this account, which is why it took us a year in order to get this on an agenda. But essentially, there's $440 that has been sitting in account for 3+ years at this point. That was always destined to go to the No Freeze Shelter in Wyndham. This is just getting it to where it belongs, essentially.
Thank you, Ben. Are there any other points of discussion? Any questions? Alrighty, so I'm going to motion to approve this by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Alrighty, perfect. So we're going to move on to this bylaw amendment resolution regarding the need for standing rules. So I'll have, I think it's Josh and Ben. You guys.
I think it's just Josh.
Oh, just Josh. Sorry. My bad.
So an existing part of our bylaws in bylaw 5 is that we have to have standing rules and we have to do it every year. This is just making a more clear outline of what should be in those rules to make sure that we're being as accessible and as friendly to outside students as possible. And there's just a bunch of stuff in green, which is everything I added or governed.
Alright. Are there any other points of discussion? Any questions?
Part I of A, governing board standing rules or something.
So, Gov Board is technically a Senate committee when it comes to referring legislation, so that had to still be in here. I just rewrote the line. So you can pass legislation through you and then send it to Senate if someone doesn't go to an advocacy committee. So in your standing rules, there's no reference to that. So it doesn't, you don't need to pass it through Senate for your case, for the way that your standing rules are currently written.
That doesn't mean Gov Board is the Senate committee.
When it comes to passing standing rules.
No,
You want to make it Gov Board? You want to make it that?
Yeah, I would move to strike that. I think if you want the governing board to have its standing rules approved by Senate, you should just have the governing board standing rules approved by Senate. But the governing board exists as a separate entity, and I don't think that like doing oversight in one place but not another is proper. So I would invite a senator to move to strike for AI. I'll make that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion from Kyle to strike section in section 4, section A, I. Is there a second to that motion? Do we need a second? Sean? All right, Sean Dunn is our second. Do we need a vote for that, or is it just?
Unless John agrees.
I disagree.
All right, so we'll do a hand vote on this motion to strike out this clause. So basically, that means that we will vote on Senate standing rules or for advocacy committees, but not governing boards standing rules at Senate, if I'm correct. Okay. All right, so we're going to move to a hand vote about that amendment. Are there questions? So we're not amending governing boards, we're talking about this clause right here. So if this stays in, then governing board standing rules will be approved at Senate. If we remove it, then governing board just votes on their own standing rules.
Well, can I clarify that a
Yeah.
little bit more? It's not that I'm necessarily opposed to governing board standing rules being approved at Senate. What I'm opposed to is the idea that there's a part of the standing rules that are approved at Senate and a part that's not. I think that's silly, and that's my reading of 4A. So I'm moving to strike and just say, if they're not approved at Senate, because I do think it's proper for governing board to be a separate thing that reports to the Senate in different ways, but not in this way. But regardless, the more firmly held conviction is that approving part of gov board standing rules, but not all of them, is silly.
Would you be open to an amendment where it's just the governing board standing rules are subject to?
I think this is better. I think striking it is better. If this motion fails, I would be open to it. But I think this is better, and letting the gov board be independent.
Yeah.
Yeah, committee standing rules, because the committees are technically,
Committees are committees of the Senate.
yeah.
Gov board is not a committee of the Senate.
They voted on their standing rules after this past week, which is
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. The four advocacy committees are like standing committees of the legislative branch.
Under the current bylaw 5, without this legislation, they still would have to have voted their standing rules, and it would still have to be subject to Senate review.
And I'm also striking governing board. Mentions to the governing board in part 4. I disagree. Can we maybe go into suggestion mode and show what we're doing?
So what Ben or Kyle is proposing is striking this and striking this. Yes?
Yes. Well,
Yes. Okay. So we had, yeah, John.
I'm also going to propose to strike advocacy coordinator responsibilities. Those people are hired and they provide their job descriptions. And deputy director, they can't change someone's job description after they've been hired.
yeah, that's a legal thing. We should strike one of them. Motion on the table.
Alrighty. Are there anything else that people? Yeah.
From a payroll point of view, the thing in the job description on job X and the thing in the offer letter that was signed is the control conversion, regardless of what's in the document.
They should be a public document. Those documents are not public. Once the job
Those
description.
can be FOIA.
But I have to FOIA a document to go into a committee notes.
This is a different conversation.
Yeah,
That's
this
a
is a separate conversation.
I don't know the answer to that. I think it's okay to have it in, but what Ben's saying is job X and the offer letters trump this. So if it's in,
If everyone could just go to the microphone or speak up louder, because I'm sure my minute takers can't hear you, neither can the recording. So just so that we're all on the same page. Thank you.
yes. Yeah, we got microphones there and there.
You're struggling, broskies. I'm so sorry.
Sorry. Alrighty, so are we good to vote on striking these three things? Yeah, Leah. Yes, yeah. Oh,
Restate the whole motion.
okay, so the motion is to strike the governing board, then this sentence I'm not gonna say, and then these two clauses I'm not gonna say. by Kyle. Is there a second to all three of these? Sean, perfect. Any other points of discussion or questions on these three things? Which one is that? This- Oh, this, yeah. Yeah, so basically every committee has to, like, reapprove their standing rules at the beginning of each semester. What? Like the so like in student services, she just approved her standing rules for this semester. So then spring semester. So student services just voted to approve their fall semester standing rules. Spring semester, they'll go back, revise whatever if they need to, and just basically reapprove them, is what this is saying at the beginning, yeah.
The standing rules after they're passed and corrected our rules student services for the whole year, like the 2023-24 academic year. So that means we have to go back and revise it and pass it again.
If there's things that need to be revised, according to this, it has to be at the beginning of each semester. If there's nothing you need to revise, then you can just pass it through. Yeah.
Okay, we have to change the date.
No. Yes. That we need to have updated standing rules each semester. You can't because you're not a senator, but
I propose dispensing with the motion on the table before we.
yeah, so let's get rid of these three things, okay? So we're gonna move to a vote on these three items. We're gonna do a hand vote. You can only vote if you're a senator. So all of those in favor of striking these three clauses, raise your hand. Like high up, I gotta count them. High up, guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 to strike. Any opposed to striking? 1, 2, 3, and 4. Sorry. What? Okay, all of those opposed to striking these things, raise your hand up high. Everybody stop talking, please. Mackenzie, you can't vote twice. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, 4 opposed. I'm abstaining from this. Okay, so
Question. Can they be voted on separately? Because I feel like I would have different opinions.
I second
The motion-
okay,
Can
okay.
you use the mic, please? I'm so sorry. Please, pass the mic around. That's not what y'all want. Pass the mic around.
Yes, we just voted, the voting.
Yeah, we already voted. Voting's done. All three of these things are strike. The vote was 12 to 4 to 1, with me being the abstention. Okay. Okay, so then Lorian was asking if a senator would like to make a motion to make this at the beginning of each year instead of each semester. Is there a senator who would like to pick that up? Okay. Josh is gonna motion. Who's gonna second? Jada's gonna second. Josh motions to change this from semester to year. Jada seconds. Alrighty. Are there any questions or points of discussion on this? Peter?
I would recommend that this just be deleted altogether. I'm unsure what an advocacy agenda is, but we do hire directors to come up with the agendas on their own. That's what they're hired to do. I don't know that the Senate needs to be approving the plans of directors that are hired to do that job. Directors do, the Senate most certainly should have a say in how our finances are dedicated to those programs. But the programs themselves, I think, lies in the responsibility of directors. And I would love more clarification on what an advocacy agenda is.
Yeah, I agree. I thought this was standing rules. What does that mean, Josh? Advocacy agenda.
Just points of clarification so that when you walk into a committee meeting, that you know what you're walking into.
Yeah, that's for standing rules, but this says that each committee shall design and coordinate a semesterly advocacy agenda.
It's not in the majority there in the bylaw. If you want
Oh,
to do
okay.
it, you're more than welcome to.
So this was already in the bylaws.
My motion is strike.
I second.
Okay,
I second.
Angelo Montez is
I think we have to vote on the
There's a
motion that was
on the
here,
table,
and then let's do that one.
Unless the senator would like to withdraw the motion, the existing motion on the table.
Can I extend the motion to strike out, I can extend the motion.
One thing at a time. I know I'm a hypocritical, but
No more talking until you're holding a microphone.
Josh, are you withdrawing this motion? Yes or no?
No.
To change semester to year?
No, let's vote on that, and then we'll get to this stuff. Let's vote on that motion.
Okay, so we're gonna vote on changing semester to year. Hand vote. All of those in favor of changing semester to year, raise your hands. Up high. Only vote if you're a senator. 1, 2. All of those opposed? 3. Are you voting for yes or no?
I'm voting.
Okay.
Sorry.
3 votes for yes. Who's voting no? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. All of those abstaining? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So we're gonna go ahead and approve that. Did it fail?
Three voted yes.
Sorry. Guys, this is like too much for me.
I don't think a motion has ever failed.
All right. Is there another motion to strike this clause entirely? Yeah, Senator has to motion to remove this clause. Okay. Okay, so Jada is gonna motion, Haritha is gonna second, to just strike this entire clause. Are there any questions or points of discussion? Okay, we're gonna do a vote. All those in favor, raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. Okay, all those opposed, raise your hands. 1, 2, 2. All those abstaining. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 abstaining. Okay, so this motion passes? Okay. I'm like losing track. This is too many numbers, guys. Like, all right, so we're deleting that. Alrighty, are there any other, okay, are there any other motions, points of discussion, changes that people want to make? Yes? There was 8 abstentions.
It was 7-3.
Yes, 738. Next person asks me about numbers. You're done. All right, are there any other points of discussion or questions about this piece of legislation? Alrighty, so we're gonna move into a hand vote to pass this legislation, just because there were a couple different things. So all of those in favor of passing this legislation as it looks. I just asked, were there any other points of discussion or questions? Okay, I asked it 3 times. Go ahead, Aretha.
In the therefore be it resolved, since we got rid of section 5 and we're going to do section 4.
Yes, I'm gonna take that as a friendly grammar. So we did that. We're gonna go on that. All right, Mackenzie, do you have a question or a point of discussion?
No, I'm just looking through the bylaws right now on what it says about standing rules, because the green and the black is messing my eyesight a little bit. Because I'm just confused on why we need this legislation. Like, I just feel like it's confusing. We just removed 4 things that I don't even know what they were. I don't know if anybody else remember the 4 things we just removed. So I'm going over the bylaws right now. I'm just confused on why we need them. We already passed standing rules in the committees.
Yeah.
We've all passed it in the past. We're continuing to pass it right now. The committees vote on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, because the standing rules before today haven't been voted on in a couple of years.
You
correct?
see, I passed standing rules last year in development, so that's why
I'm not sure all the committees did, so this would just like require all the committees to do it, basically. So while some people will like be proactive and do that on their own, not everybody will, so this just requires people to do that.
Is it on? Okay. It's my understanding that within the standing rules for each committee, we have written mandatory that it be revisited every year. So I'm not a senator, but I kind of agree with Mackenzie on this, that it's already required within our own standing rules to vote on them and then vote on them at Senate. So I don't know, this might be a bit redundant, potentially, but just putting that out there for anyone that wants
Not
to know.
every standing rules has that clause in it.
Which ones don't?
Senate doesn't, I don't know if Gulf Board does, but that's it. If you feel that's something that should be in each of the standing rules, we can talk about that when we get to a committee standing rule. No, Lorraine wants, instead of having this clause here, have it in each standing rule that the committee will revisit their own standing rules at the end of the academic year, which is what her committee standing will say. That's what yours says for development. I don't know what Sean says. I wrote that.
Y'all, use the mics, please.
Is this on? Okay. So my standing rules in particular, I don't know about yours, say that they shall expire upon the last meeting of the committee of the 2023-2024 year. It doesn't say anywhere that we have to renew it. So if we want to include that as a something in this, then we should probably do that, or we could keep this legislation.
I'm just gonna say, we're gonna have to vote on this legislation regardless because it's on the agenda. So people, you can motion to refer it back, but, like, committees aren't required to keep that clause in. So if the next Student Services Committee Director decides that they wanna take that clause out when they approve it, they can, and then that clause is gone. But the bylaws are just a little bit more cover.
Yeah, to add on to that, I actually do think that the redundancy might be good, just so it's required that they're looking at these things every year, and I think that'd be really good for the committees and people involved to actually look at those rules. So yeah, I'm in favor of this.
Okay, Josh?
I move to refer this back to internal.
Okay. So I don't think that needs a second. Okay, so we're gonna move this back to internal, so we're not gonna vote on this. So Josh is gonna do a little bit more work. But in the meantime, we are gonna go through, because everybody's already approved their standing rules for this year. So the first one we have is the Senate standing rules. I think there weren't a ton of big changes. The biggest change is this clause here, if I'm not mistaken. So basically, beforehand, there was no real protocol for, if we're going on for hours and hours and hours and hours about one piece of legislation, how to end that. This clause here explains that a little bit better. So basically, it says that a senator may make a motion to suspend further debate on whatever piece of legislation is currently being considered at the Senate. So to have a successful motion means that it'll force an immediate vote, basically. So to have a successful motion, somebody has to make it, and then myself or whoever is the chair can choose someone to speak in opposition to that person making the motion. We'll then vote, or then the person has to have a second to that original motion to end discussion. And if they get that second, then we'll have to go to a two-thirds majority, and if two-thirds of the Senate says, yes, let's bring this to an immediate vote, we vote and we move on. It also says that the chair can make this motion without a second, and then it just needs a simple majority to pass. So it would still need to be voted on to end debate. So I think that's the biggest change.
13 is also new.
13 is also new. So basically this says that every 90 minutes, so every hour and a half, we'll be required to recess for maximum 10 minutes. And then after 3 hours, everyone will vote, or the senators will vote, if we remain in session. And then the sub-clauses are just kind of, if we vote to adjourn or if we vote to stay in session, what happens with both of those things. We good with that?
I have a question, just to pose.
Okay.
As part of we can go to questions.
Yes, we can go to questions.
Does anyone have an issue with changing what was old policy and procedure where Ally as chair can decide to end debate at whenever she wants, which is something that's part of the Douglas standing rules, Douglas rules of order, and is changed in the standing rules to be requiring a simple majority? Does anyone have an issue with that? You're justice. I don't think that's allowed. Oh, then, yeah, go for it.
I would argue that the Douglas Rules of Order supersede the standing rules, given that they're the official rules of order of USG. So unless you want to amend the Douglas Rules of Order, then you can't be going against the Douglas Rules of Order in the standing rules.
It's in the standing rules that it supersedes it where it conflicts.
I'll have to see that.
It's in the standing rules higher up that where it conflicts with the rules of order in 5. Yeah. In 5A, where if it conflicts with the rules of order, then the standing rules of the Senate supersede.
Alrighty, any other questions or points of discussion on the Senate standing rules? Alrighty, so seeing none, I'm going to move to pass this by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Alrighty, so we have standing rules now. Alrighty, so now we're going to move on to the Academic Affairs Committee standing rules. Kamara, I don't know if you want to say anything or...
Yeah, these are the standing, These are the standing rules that we passed in committee. I sent them to Josh, so he made his suggestions and edits. So if anyone has any questions or amendments, let us know. I guess that's what you're supposed to be doing now, but yeah.
All right, any questions or points of discussion on the Ac Affairs standing rules? Alrighty, so seeing none, I'm gonna... Oh, sorry. Gotta be quicker, guys, come on. We move fast here.
Do we still have to vote on the committee ones, given that Josh's didn't
Yes.
pass?
Yeah, the standing rules have to pass in committee and Senate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
It's not a requirement, but it is in the bylaws that there should be standing rules.
But it doesn't, the bylaws don't say that the sentence, oh, no, it doesn't. It's literally right there.
I've read this
bylaw.
Alrighty, so I'm gonna motion to pass this by unanimous consent unless there's any other questions or points of discussion. Any objections? Okay, perfect. We're gonna move on to external affairs. Sean.
Also pretty straightforward, our standing rules. I don't know if there's anything too contentious.
Alrighty, any questions or points of discussion? Alrighty, seeing none, I'm gonna motion to pass this by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Perfect. Student development.
Hello, everyone. The big update is a change in the mission statement of student development since we kind of switched gears this year, but everything else is pretty much consistent with what I've been talking to you all about with student development this year, so I'm open to any questions or comments.
Are there any questions or points of discussion? Alrighty, seeing none, I'm going to motion to pass this by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Perfect. And student services. Go ahead.
Okay, so these are the standing rules that we passed in our committee. That's it.
Alrighty, any questions or points of discussion? Alrighty, seeing none, I'm going to motion to pass this by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? None. Perfect.
Thanks,
Alrighty.
guys.
Woo. Next up, we have the USG SAIT MOU. Ben, I'll give you the floor.
Hey y'all, every year we have to pay for our computers, our printers, all the software we use, all the access that USG gets to university systems. This is the document that authorizes us to pay for all of that access. It is word for word unchanged, except that they've changed the payment deadline from September 15th to September 30th, because today is September 13th and we weren't going to get it in on time anyway. So that is the only change to this document from last year, as well as changing some years. Other than that, this is an identical document to one passed last year, and this will allow us to continue to use computers and QuickBooks and keep track of our finances and everything. Strongly recommend passing this.
Alrighty, are there any points of discussion or questions for Ben about this? Alrighty, seeing none, I'm going to motion to pass this by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Perfect, that passes. Next up, we have a constitutional amendment regarding the status of the trustee. We've got John.
Hi, everyone. So, as many of you know, Anya, our wonderful undergraduate student trustee, is currently the trustee. And so when we had conversations earlier this year, as many of you might know, last year we passed legislation to allow the undergraduate trustee to be paid. What we quickly learned was that is a conflict of interest, not able to be done. Illegal. So we have illegal legislation on our books. As we spoke more with Anya, and as Anya is working and advocating, we also realized that Anya, being a member of Senate and governing board, is also a conflict of interest, as she is in a separate entity, represents different campuses, and so cannot really be in USG. This is legislation that Anya and I have spoken about. Anya's totally on board. I can speak for her on that. Just an update. Putting a trustee into an advisory role, hopefully, like we had Dr. Mundrine, the student trustee will come and speak and address Senate and Gov Board at occasions and update you all on information that she or whoever is in the future has, but this is taking them out of the organization for conflict of interest.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions or points of discussion? So just also a little background, so if this passes Senate, since it's a constitutional amendment, it will be on the ballot during our fall elections at the end of September. So pending it passing there, then it'll become effect. So basically, the undergraduate student trustee right now holds an ex officio position on governing board as well as in Senate. So if these pass on the ballot, then those positions will basically be striked. Good. Alrighty, so I'm going to motion to pass this by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Alrighty, so this passes, and then we are on to our last piece of legislation, a resolution establishing an elections oversight commissioner. Ben and Josh, yay!
Hey all, sick of me yet? So this is a fairly long bylaw amendment. Just talking through some of the ideas. Leo does have a proposed amendment that we'll get into in a moment. This is learning and iterating from some of the lessons that we've learned, especially in the most recent election, but also in some elections before that, in which the current state of the Chief Justice both being the person making the day-to-day decisions of the election and then also being the person who ultimately decides, and leads the panel deciding whether the election was fair, is an inherent conflict of interest. Having the Chief Justice involved kind of in those, split-second decisions of how to run the election makes it more difficult for them to be an impartial judge of whether to certify the election. And we saw that kind of come to a head in the last election. And so this brings back in a role called Elections Oversight Commissioner that was actually in place my freshman year. So, learning and iterating on that. They report to the Chief Justice, but that EOC role is responsible for the administration of the fall elections, the spring elections, as well as when the judiciary elects their Chief Justice, which usually happens once a year. And so, this goes through, it outlines provisions of when the EOC has a conflict of interest. It says that the EOC gets paid basically at the same level as, same level as the Deputy Chief Justice, and, a couple other roles currently would be at $15 an hour. It's a long bylaw amendment, so I'm not sure it's necessarily a good use of our time to go through it clause by clause, but I'm certainly open to questions. And then when we get into discussion, I think there is an amendment on the table as well.
Before we get into any motions or anything, I'm going to do questions and points of discussion on this piece of legislation in general. Lorian?
I have a question. Would this this person be employed the whole year or only during the election cycles?
So the idea is that this is a person who's on payroll continuously, but doesn't necessarily, you know, if they're not being assigned work by their supervisor, they shouldn't be clocking in, and that's something to keep in mind. However, you know, planning for the elections and making sure that we have good turnout is really something that we as an organization need to be intentional about for the entire year, right? Planning for an election, making sure it's well-designed, stuff like that. So this person is on payroll continuously. They are hired, you know, they're hired for the period of the year, and they can be removed between elections if necessary.
And, sorry, one more. And who would be their, you said if their managers assign them work? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Who would be
It
their
would be
manager?
Jack, the Chief Justice.
Chief Justice supervises the EOC.
Thank you, I was just curious.
Of course. Kenzie has a question.
Also, no, I don't know if Ben said this, but if the EOC was somebody, so like, let's say I was the EOC for the fall elections, if I'm running again in the spring, you obviously can't be the EOC for an election if you're running in it. So that person would either have to give up their position and go to somebody new or not run. Go ahead, Mackenzie.
So these positions, they're not open to justices at all.
The EOC position?
Yeah.
The idea is that justices exist separately, and they exist to like judge the work of the EOC after the EOC is done. So the EOC and justices are meant to be two separate entities.
Just because from what I can remember, we did have, or there was something similar, I don't know if it was just like as set in stone, where there were a few that were appointed to like oversee, but it was usually just justices, or like Damani and Holly. And
Yeah.
Then, and then last year, I believe it was,
Kamara did some of it,
Kamara,
Leo did some of
right.
it, Jack did some of it.
right? But because they were justices, so this is just stating that it can no longer be justices.
No, so
Technically-
basically what this does, is eliminating that conflict of interest. So the reason that it was like 3 people last year is because typically the Chief Justice would be prosecuting all of these violations and everything like that. But since he had so many conflicts of interest with the people, because he was the Chief Justice and he was also running the election, so he had a bunch of conflicts of interest in both of those areas, he couldn't do it, so then Leo had to do some, but then Leo had some conflicts of interest, and then Kamara had to do some. So basically, by creating the EOC, it's not saying that it can't be a justice, but it's just saying to stay away from it being justices so that they can do their job. The EOC can logistically run the elections, do all of that, and then the justices, Chief Justice, and everything can come in afterwards and like clean up the mess, basically.
Yeah, and also Kamara was prosecuting, or were you prosecution or defense? She was prosecution for one case, she was defense for another case, and what that meant is that at the end of the day, she couldn't actually be on the board voting, and so we had a bunch of quorum issues where we didn't have enough justices acting as justices to certify the election
So
from
then
time to
should
time.
it explicitly say that it can't be a justice?
It does.
Oh, it does?
Justice, you can't be on comp.
I don't think it does. Does it say that the EOC can't be? I think it says that, oh yeah. They may not be a justice.
Oh, yeah.
Technically, there's nothing saying that no one on comms can be, but I would really hesitate to sign an offer letter for like the creative director to also run our elections.
Right here.
I think that there's something wrong with that. It just says they can't campaign.
So it says the comm team can't, what? It says the comm team can't be in the EOC?
The EOC should be a separate person, right? There's nothing saying that the SOC staff can't also be the Student Services Advocacy Director. Like, we know that different people hold different jobs for the most part.
Kamara?
Hi, can you, this is Kamara speaking, can you scroll back up to the top? It says Election Oversight Committee, right? So it's not one person. I know Ben was talking about like hiring someone. Oh, it's commissioner. Okay. So that means that this person is going to hold the election violation hearing and lead the hearing?
So this person is going to be responsible for prosecution.
Okay, they prosecute, so then do both sides get a quote defense attorney if they're being prosecuted?
That's not in here. Those could be justices. Angelo has been waiting to ask a question for like 10 minutes. So I really do
Wait,
wanna-
so the judiciary has discretion to say, oh, there is no quote defense attorney? I just wanted to like, because I
To
know.
my knowledge, defense attorney is a new thing that started last
Oh,
year.
it was?
When
Oh,
I
thought
first
that was
ran
new.
and Damani tried to knock me for like not including my name in the right place on my budget, nobody gave me a defense attorney for that. I just sent him an angry email back.
Okay, so that's not happening anymore.
I mean, there is discretion of the judiciary to run election hearings how they see fit.
This
And if-
person just to prosecute hearings.
But this avoids the conflict of interest of like, and justice also prosecuting and then they can't be in the thing. Angelo has a question and I really want to let them ask it.
All right, I'm just gonna say I might be dumb, but wouldn't a conflict of interest be the like election oversight commissioner to be supervised by the chief justice, or am I like?
So,
'Cause I'm not sure if I'm like overthinking it, but like if they supervise, they could technically tell them what to do.
So, right, the role of the judiciary in an election, and this is reinforced under this, is the judiciary is meant to call the balls and strikes, right? The Elections Oversight Commissioner is there to run outreach and give out the cookies and set the deadlines and like make sure that things run cleanly. But if and when there are violations or anything like that, the judiciary is the ones who actually do that. Everyone has to be supervised by someone, right? Unless you're an elected official, everyone has a supervisor. I think that the Chief Justice being that supervisor makes more sense than any other role in this organization. Certainly, no one in exec who could run for office and the speaker who could run for office should not be overseeing the EOC.
I understand that, but it's just like in my mind that just seems kind of conflict. Like that seems like a conflict.
I have a question. Sorry, Leo. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think Leo has a response to that, so.
I do too, but you go first, Leo.
So the response that I would make to the whole conflict of interest thing is that the idea of the EOC is removing the conflict of interest from the judiciary. So Chief Justice would not really have a conflict. Like the EOC, I guess if the Chief Justice is not being involved in the election, they don't really have a conflict of interest to really impart on the EOC. Because the goal of the EOC is to run the elections, and if the goal of the judiciary is to run fair elections impartially, then having the EOC below them, they'll maintain that level of impartiality. So the goal of the intention behind this is to remove that conflict of interest from, so when you have this impartial body, you have that conflict of interest with running the elections, you now won't have that in that body. So even though a member below them can get conflicts, the people above them will not have.
Lloyd? I would like to start by saying I completely agree with this resolution. I think this is a really good idea to put an EOC in place. But if the responsibility of the EOC is going to be outreach and event organizing, would it not be better to have them under an office like comms, where they're doing outreach and they're completely separate from the judiciary, which is exactly what we're trying to, as Leo just said, we're trying to separate the conflict of interest. Wouldn't it be better to make their boss not the person that has the conflict?
Well, then their boss would be the vice president, who could very feasibly be running in an election, which my personal view is that it's worse, right? That's not to say the EOC is not going to talk to comms. Like, of course, comms has a vital role in advertising our elections, but the EOC is also the one setting deadlines and making sure the election packets are properly authored and like all of the things that go into running an election. I think the idea of having the Office of Communications also run our elections is not necessarily the best idea or in fitting with the communications team's role.
So, I'm sorry, I have like a follow-up question / thought. So we only have President's Office, Vice President's Office, and then Judiciary?
No.
We have the
Senate too?
Comptroller's Office, we have the Office of Diversity, and we have the Office of the Speaker.
Okay, so given that we have a lot of different branches, would it not be a good idea to make EOC a standalone position that isn't under anyone?
Every office is overseen by an elected official, right? We have 6 elected officials in this organization and 6 offices. Unless we are proposing electing the Elections Oversight Commissioner, which to me seems pretty messy and counterproductive to the point of an Elections Oversight Commissioner. Right, there are provisions in here, I think it's 6 of this, that the EOC cannot be removed except for cause during an election. Right, the idea is that like we are attempting to insulate this role from any sort of undue influence. But at the end of the day, you have to be supervised by someone. Someone has to assign you tasks and tell you what to do. And the judiciary is the owner of our elections.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I see that it says ratified by a vote of the judiciary. Could it be, and I can't propose a motion because I'm not a senator, but could it be beneficial to include another party in being able to vote on them being removed? I know I'm being like, I don't know. I'm just posing that question. I know I'm being like picky, but by judiciary and Office of Diversity, I think that's a great idea, Mackenzie.
Office of Diversity already needs to sign off on all the firings that's in the Constitution.
Okay.
So,
Already.
Fine then. Thank you for answering my questions.
right, Tay? I'm not making that up. Yeah.
I have to approve the fires and the hires. Tainasha speaking. Hello.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm happy then. Sorry.
Mackenzie's got one.
Wait.
I apologize to the minute takers, as I've been doing a lot lately.
So-
I'm so sorry.
So who's appointing and or hiring them? The judiciary?
The Chief Justice
So
and ratified by the Senate.
how does that eliminate the conflict of interest?
So the conflict of interest arises in who makes the decisions on the election.
Right. But the Chief Justice hires the judiciary. The Chief Justice.
The
The
Chief
Chief
Justice
Justice doesn't hire the judiciary, it's
Who
a nominations committee, so like me, Angelo, Tay, Stephanie, Jack, and
So
Leo.
the same committee can nominate EOC?
No, so we nominated all the justices, the new justices. Then the justices have an election to elect a chief justice among them. And then the chief justice chooses their deputy and the EOC.
Right, but
And
then,
then
do you see how, like, I'm confused on how that eliminates the conflict of interest? Because the justices can't be on the EOC, but the chief justice is still choosing who's on the EOC.
Look, so the EOC, the EOC can't be a justice, right?
Right.
B, the conflict of interest does not arise because someone appoints someone else. The conflict of interest arises when you are making decisions about the running of the election and you are also making decisions about whether the running of the election was fair. That's the conflict of interest. This separates that into 2 separate roles.
I think I'm just having a problem seeing an actual separation between the EOC.
Because
and,
it's 2 separate people.
like,
One of them,
technically, but there's
and the subordinate has job security.
maybe like
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
Kamara, and then Haritha, and then, did you have your hand up?
I was just gonna respond to that.
Oh, then Haritha, you go first, and then we'll do Kamara, then John.
I guess it's been kind of resolved, but I was just saying, like, by my understanding of this, it's like, the way that I like to think about it is like, if I did something and then it did not turn out well, then obviously I'm going to be biased, and if I'm the one making that decision, I see the conflict of interest there. But when we have an EOC, even if it's appointed by the Chief Justice, the EOC is the one mainly running the election, so the Chief Justice is just going to judge that work at the end, should anything go wrong. So I truly feel like this amendment would, like, alleviate that conflict of interest.
Exactly, like, the Chief Justice would be doing what any supervisor does and judging their supervisee's work, basically.
Yeah, so it makes sense that they're the boss.
Kamara?
Yeah, I understand what Ben is saying. So it's like, if you're putting a middle person in between the situation. So yes, you elect the commissioner, but Jack or the Chief Justice can't make the decision for him, like no matter if they're like friends or whatever. So I understand what? Well, there's always going to be a conflict of interest. Everybody has friends that are doing their bidding
Or a
elsewhere at
student
USG. So I
organization.
mean, it's a popularity contest as it is. So.
Are we just covering ourselves, or are we actually trying to make a fair election?
I think this does make a fairer election. elections.
It's fairer than it was, you know, it can't be
We
perfect.
can't,
And it
we're not-
smooths out a lot of logistical things, like we were saying before, like Jack had a lot of conflict of interest, so he couldn't prosecute some of the, like violations, and he couldn't, like even be in, did he certify, like a lot of the violations, like he wasn't able to vote on those, so, and then Leo had some, and then it had to come to Kamara, but then it came to the point where, you know, they might not have had enough justices at the end to actually certify a lot of things, so logistically smooths some things out as well. John or Peter, whichever one of you has it, and then Angela. Like,
Hello, Peter. I was going to say, even beyond, I know there's a lot of conversation going on though, I do just want to highlight the existence of this position of someone purely dedicating their time to elections is incredibly important. Over the past 2 years, those responsibilities have been split between Jack and Allie and myself, and Irene before Allie as well. And it's awesome to have a dedicated person whose pure responsibility is packing this room. It's very difficult when Jack has conflicting things, or taking names out of it, the Chief Justice, the Vice President, and the Speaker have other priorities. We need someone really committed to elections and making sure this room is packed every semester. So even if there are concerns about whether it is more fair, I think the mere existence of the position needs to happen. And I would encourage that this be passed.
Angela?
Sorry, one last thing for me. It's just I completely agree with this legislation as well. I think it's a great idea. However, it just raises some other concerns regarding justices as well. All of us, most of us were on a Judiciary Nominations Committee, right? So if we're selecting justices that select other people, it's just it's another pothole of creating and trying to get rid of conflicts of interest that create more conflicts of interest, if that makes sense. So I think we're all a little bit concerned as to why you would make a position underneath, you know what I mean? I know I sound like a broken record.
Josh?
I move to suspend further debate.
Second.
Okay. So Josh is moving to suspend further debate, and we have a second from Kyle. So, yeah, so you can go ahead and then we'll go with the motion.
Okay, there we go. I kind of forgot what I was going to say, but quick question. I don't know if someone asked this already. Is there any way that we could put the EOC somewhere else? Just because of the simple fact that I understand where Kenzie's coming from, but Peter also made a good point. I feel like every semester that elections happen, this room needs to be packed. I feel like it's not packed enough. And to have somebody dedicated to kind of promoting it and getting it out there would be great, but I also feel like the conflict of interest is making it tricky.
I think basically what the argument is there's going to be a conflict of interest anywhere, because there's
It's
6
gonna be
elected.
supervision anyway.
Yeah, so you have to be, every single employee is supervised by one of the 6 elected officials. So it's a conflict of interest no matter what, when the election commissioner is underneath an elected official. So I think the idea is that the judiciary has just housed elections. They're the ones that are going to be, the Chief Justice is going to be prosecuting some of these violations and determining if this election is fair. So it makes sense for them to be their supervisor, because same as I evaluate, Kyle and Arunima, the Chief Justice would evaluate the EOC and how they're doing their job. Yeah. And since the EOC isn't a justice, only justices elect the Chief Justice. So the EOC doesn't vote to elect the Chief Justice. And then there's other fail-safes in place, so if the Chief Justice doesn't like what the EOC is doing, they have to, it has to be ratified by the judiciary, and it also has to be approved by Tay's office. So there's a couple steps, so the Chief Justice can't just say, okay, I don't like you, you're gone.
Right, the Chief Justice is the only role in this organization that is in any way insulated from the EOC, right? Having the EOC report to me, for example, would be a clear conflict of interest because I just ran in the last election. Having, same thing with John or Peter or Tay or Allie, right? All of them run in elections that the EOC oversees. The Chief Justice is the only way, the only person who is not elected by the student body. There's still an indirect election, right? And we are all, you know, we all know each other. We're never going to have 100% perfect, complete stranger to everyone else and like perfect rational robots or something like that. This is the best way that at least the authors of this legislation have found to best insulate the EOC from any possible conflicts.
All right, so we do have a motion to suspend further debate by Josh. That was seconded by Kyle. We need 2/3 majority of Senate, unless, like, if there's no other questions or comments or concerns, then we can also just move. Yeah. So are there, I'll ask that first. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns? Yes, yeah, if we suspend debate, it forces it to an immediate vote. But if people are already done with discussion, then we should
We don't need to
vote.
suspend debate.
Are we ready to vote? Okay. So I'm gonna move to do a hand vote for this because it's had a little bit of discussion. So all of those in favor of approving this piece of legislation and creating the EOC, raise your hands up high. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. All right, go ahead and put your hands down. All of those opposed? 0. All those abstaining? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. Okay, so this passes. Congratulations. We now have an EOC. Okay. Alrighty. So that concludes our voting items. Nothing for discussion as far as I'm concerned. 2023-2024 Senate and caucus dates. Make sure you're taking a look at this. Just marking these down in your calendars. Next week we'll have caucus. And 104, we're going to do a legislation workshop. Save the date, fall retreat. So that's going to be Saturday, October 7th, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. over at Depot campus. There is food and transportation available. If you are going to need either of those things and you haven't filled out the form, email me and I can send that to you. And then SOC positions if you wanted to. Yeah.
Hey, best friends. I just want to advertise SOC staff a little bit more to make sure that you all know that it's open for you to apply, open for you to get an interview from me and my minute editors over there. I know right now isn't the best example of how the SOC job position can be quite simple, but I think it's a great opportunity for you to learn more about USG and to interact with more USG members while getting paid.
Awesome. Alrighty. Are there any other comments, questions, concerns that anybody wants? Okay.
There was an amendment. No, the amendment was never made. We're done.
I'm gonna call the close at 8:23 p.m. Grab some pizza on your way out. We still have some. Peace out, Ryan. Have a good night. Thank you, UCTV. Wait, Josh, you need to show me how to fix this.